It started. The Chinese EV market is way worse than we thought. For some time now, it seemed like electric vehicles, or EVs, were the golden ticket for China's automotive industry. But guess what? Things have taken a sharp turn, and not in a good way. You see, global EV growth has hit the brakes hard, and while that's happening, most Chinese car manufacturers are bleeding money faster than a leaky faucet. Some are even on the edge of bankruptcy. Plus, to add fuel to the fire, the domestic car market in China is also putting on the brakes. So, what gives? Well, experts are raising the alarm, saying the Chinese EV market is way worse off than we thought, and they've got some solid reasons to back that up. We've dug deep and uncovered 7 reasons why this market is in a severe slump. Let's dive in and break it down. Reason number 7. The Chinese car market is in decline. Before we zoom in on the nitty-gritty, let's take a step back and look at the bigger picture. Once upon a time, China's economic engine was roaring, and with that came a boom in the automotive sector. The more people climbed on the economic ladder, owning a car became a tangible dream for many. The peak? Well, that was about 7 years back, when a staggering 24 million shiny new vehicles hit the streets of China in a single year. But alas, since then, the winds have shifted. Last year, the numbers painted a different story. Instead of climbing, car sales took a dip, landing at just a tad over 21 million. Now, that might not seem like a drastic nosedive, but in a market as colossal as China's, every million counts. And guess what? This decline isn't exclusive to electric vehicles. It's dragging down the whole automotive show. Sure, there were a few years of impressive growth, especially for EVs, but lately, it's been more of a slow crawl than a sprint. 2023 waved goodbye with a modest 31% growth, and the trend isn't looking up in the first quarter of 2024. Why the slump? Well, there's a bunch of factors at play. Maybe the initial excitement of jumping on the EV bandwagon is worn off, or perhaps it's the looming shadow of an economy that's hit a bit of a rough patch. So when you connect the dots, it's clear. A stagnant economy, coupled with a shrinking car market, spells trouble for the future of electric vehicles in China. Number 6 on our list, the Chinese economy is facing some serious hurdles. After decades of unstoppable growth, the Chinese economic powerhouse is starting to show signs of wear and tear. The days of lightning-fast expansion are behind us. Now growth rates are slowing to a crawl, sometimes even lagging behind Western counterparts. Case in point, the year's projected growth rate is a modest 4%. But here's where it gets interesting. The real estate market, once a symbol of prosperity, is teetering on the edge of collapse. Add to that a cocktail of high unemployment rates and an aging population, and you've got a recipe for economic slowdown soup. And guess who's feeling the pinch the most? The middle class, whose spending habits are taking a hit. Let's not forget about the banks. They're far from being in tip-top shape, which doesn't exactly inspire confidence in investors. Plus, the government's been scrambling to inject liquidity into the system, a telltale sign that all is not well. So when you connect the dots, it's no surprise that the Chinese EV market is feeling the heat. With the economic engine sputtering, consumers are tightening their belts, and that includes holding off on splurging on electric rides. Tough times ahead indeed. Moving on to number 5, Chinese brands are struggling to break into international markets. For years, the Chinese government has been pumping resources into the EV industry, hoping to catapult local brands onto the global stage. And sure, production numbers are through the roof, but here's the catch. Chinese EV brands are still stuck at the starting line when it comes to making a splash in Western markets. Remember when everyone thought Chinese brands would dominate places like Europe? Well, reality check. That's not happening. Take BYD, for instance. They're a powerhouse in the EV game, churning out millions of electric and hybrid vehicles annually. They've got top-notch tech too, but here's the kicker. A whopping 95% of their sales stay within China's borders. And BYD isn't alone. Most Chinese EV players are singing the same tune. They've got the goods, but they can't seem to crack the international market code. And now, with the domestic market hitting the brakes, even the big shots are resorting to fire sales to move inventory. Tough break for the Chinese EV dream team. Reason number 4, EV graveyards are cropping up all over China. You see, the growth of Chinese EVs was heavily propped up by government incentives rather than sound economic principles. And if you need evidence, just take a stroll through one of these so-called EV graveyards scattered around the country. They're pretty much a fixture in every major city, and they tell a tale of oversupply gone awry. Here's the lowdown. Back in the heyday of EV fever around the middle of the last decade, everyone and their grandma seemed to be in on the EV game. At one point, there were over 500 registered EV makers vying for a piece of the pie. But here's where it gets interesting. To keep the gravy train rolling, these companies had to hit certain sales targets to stay eligible for those sweet government incentives. So, What did they do? They struck deals with car rental companies who, as it turns out, had no intention of actually putting these EVs to use. Why? Because most of them were duds, underperformers in every sense of the word. They just weren't up to snuff. So instead of hitting the road, these EVs wound up in what can only be described as automotive purgatory, the infamous graveyards. Now they're left to gather dust, thousands of them scattered across China's urban landscape, a stark reminder of a growth frenzy gone bust. It's a sobering sight, to say the least. Reason number 3. The struggle of small startups in the EV game. Out of those 500 registered EV makers we mentioned earlier, the vast majority were startups. But here's the kicker, most of them never gained enough traction to hit decent sales numbers or reach a production volume that could turn a profit. It's no surprise then that many of these startups have crashed and burned. Today only around 90 companies are still hanging on by a thread, but even that number is misleading. When you peek under the hood, you'll see the top 10 EV brands in China hog a whopping 80% of the sales. As for the rest, well, they're barely scraping by. About a third of them churn out fewer than 500 EVs every quarter. It's a recipe for the disaster waiting to happen. What's really eye-opening is that even the big players with deep pockets aren't immune to the carnage. Take Evergrande New Energy Auto, for instance. Backed by one of the largest conglomerates in the region, you'd think they'd have it made. But nope. They still ended up belly up. And get this, they were bleeding $17 million for every EV they sold. And they're not the only ones feeling the heat. Even giants like VW with a hefty $5.3 billion war chest scrambling for cash. It's a tough pill to swallow, especially considering that even state-owned companies like SAIC are feeling the squeeze. It's a dog-eat-dog world out there, and not everyone's making it out alive. Reason number 2. The entry of huge consumer electronics makers into the Chinese EV market. The competition just got even hotter in the Chinese EV arena, with tech titans like Huawei and Xiaomi throwing their hats into the ring. Oh yeah, you heard that right. These heavyweights, known for their global dominance in consumer electronics, are now gearing to shake things up in the automotive world. Now, in normal circumstances, this would be cause for celebration. After all, more competition usually spells good news for us consumers. But again, here's the kicker, these are far from normal times. With pressure mounting on manufacturers from all sides, this new wave of contenders could spell disaster for the little guys. Take Huawei, for instance. They've rolled out the S7, a sleek sedan sporting an impressive 800-volt battery architecture, clearly taking aim at the Tesla's Model S. Priced at around $35,500, that's a serious contender. Then there's Xiaomi, with their own EV offering priced even more competitively at just over $30,000, but don't let that price tag fool you. This baby boasts a hefty 435-mile range, among other bells and whistles. So while it's exciting to see new players enter the ring, it's also a stark reminder that the competition just got fiercer. And in an already cutthroat market, that could spell trouble for the little guys trying to make a name for themselves. Once again, tough times ahead. And finally, the reason that we've all been waiting for, number 1, the bloodbath has already begun. With the market growth slowing down to a crawl, it's like sharks smelling blood in the water. The delicate balance between supply and demand has been thrown off kilter, forcing car makers to get creative in their bid to stay afloat. And you know what that means? Price slashing. Yeah, even the big guns like BYD are slashing prices left and right, triggering a domino effect that's sending shockwaves through the industry. Cars have never been cheaper in China, and it's a race to the bottom as automakers duke it out for survival. The strategy? Use this price war to crush the competition and gobble up market share. As we mentioned earlier, the top 10 EV makers already have a stranglehold on 80% of the market, so it's no surprise that experts are predicting a massacre among the remaining players. It's estimated that at least 70% of them won't be around for much longer. Statements like the one from the CEO of Li Auto, calling for unity to weather the storm, are becoming the norm. Panic mode? Yeah, you bet. Everyone's acutely aware that the Chinese EV market is in way worse shape than anyone imagined. It's survival of the fittest out there, and the stakes couldn't be higher. Hey, if you enjoyed the video, please subscribe to the channel, share this video to enjoy more content.